Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We're delving deeper into the brain lately, you notice. And, it was always said to me, practice makes perfect. I played the guitar as a young kid. And obviously, all of us who have been involved in sports, there is no replacement for practicing repetitive reproduction of the skills that you're trying to learn, because they have to build a pattern in the brain. But is there a possible way where practice not necessarily is required to make perfect? We're going to dig into that in a little bit with Professor Nitzan Censor. Before we start that, of course, as every show begins, we have to thank our title sponsor, Legendary Foods, the makers of the Tasty Pastry. The Tasty Pastry started out as a replacement for the Pop-Tart, and it's become so much more. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality protein, 4 to 5 net carbs for those of you who are keto or low-carb, and they taste amazing. They taste like real cake. You will eat them because they taste amazing, and a byproduct will be they won't make you fat and unhealthy. And your kids will love them, and you don't have to feel like you're a bad parent for giving them to them. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 to save 10% off. While you're there, look around. They also have the most amazing nut butters flavored with no sugar and seasoned almonds. Check them out. Okay. Bring my guest on. Welcome to the show, Professor Censor.
Hi, Carl.
Thanks for being here. So, why was this research necessary? What put you into this area of science? What work was done before this that made this type of research necessary?
So, first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to be on your show. Heard a lot of good things about it. I'm originally I was interested in studying human visual perception and human motor skill performance, and specifically within these domains, I was interested, and that goes back to my PhD work in the field of learning. So how can humans improve their basic visual perceptual abilities or their basic motor skills? And research in the last decades and extensive research in multiple research labs across the world has shown, and you know it from daily life, that in order to improve in skill acquisition, to acquire skills and to improve your performance, you need repeated practice, repeated execution of the performance skill. And I've been conducting quite a lot of studies about that and trying to understand what are the brain mechanisms underlying improvements in visual and motor skill function. But then I got familiar with studies actually in different research domains in neuroscience, studies that actually originating from studies at the cellular level, showing that after memories are formed and new things are learned, then they get consolidated, these memories, into our brain, and they transform from being short-term memories to long-term memories. And then the common thought was that once a memory is consolidated from a short-term memory into a long-term persistent representation in the human brain of that same memory, then it's a stable memory and it's there. It could be there for life. But then research from about 2 decades ago in animal models at the cellular level revealed that potentially every time an already supposedly stable and consolidated memory is reactivated or retrieved, then it becomes susceptible to modifications, to modulation.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the research, or almost all the research in that domain was geared to show that once you kind of to challenge the consolidation theory by showing that once you reactivate the memory and you pair it with some interference, then this memory could be degraded. And it was
wait. I want to ask you a question. So theoretically, I'm recalling something.
Right.
And something happens in my environment at the moment I'm recalling it, and it kind of interrupts the complete recall and revisualization, if you will, of this memory. So then when it gets put away, it's fragmented now?
Right. So the thing is that recall is not impaired. You efficiently recall or retrieve the memory. But what is impaired, if the reactivation of that memory is paired with some interfering input, what is impaired is the storage or the restorage of that memory. Right. Because according to the reactivation theory, every time a memory is reactivated, it has to be restored again into long-term memory. It's not a one-time process anymore. Right. So then your long-term storage of the memory can be impaired if reactivation is paired with some interfering input. And looking into that body of research, which became more and more extensive across animal models and different memory domains, I started to ask, well, can we use this reactivation, restorage framework not to inhibit memories, but rather to facilitate learning? Because if indeed every time a brief reactivation of memory opens up a time window in which it could be modified, then perhaps we can briefly reactivate a learned skill. And then after it's, and not pair it with interference this time, just let the restorage happen by itself, in itself. Then maybe these brief reactivations, which ignite the neural network in our brain that stores this skill and enables improvement of this skill, then we reactivate the memory, we reactivate the brain network underlying the learned skill. And then after the reactivation, we go about our daily routine and we go to sleep at night. And it is well known that during sleep, brain things happen.
Consolidation.
Right. Right. So the learned skill is further consolidated during sleep. And then we reason that these reactivations, if we take it into our domain of skill learning, then just letting these reactivations happen instead of repetitive practice can promote a much more economic form of learning curve and save us this need to repeatedly, exhaustively practice a visual task or a motor task, and we showed it actually in both domains.
Okay, so let's discuss an application for a second. Let's say I'm trying to learn how to jump rope, and so I could either jump rope every day for 10 days. Could I effectively jump rope for 2 days and then just work on memory recall and restorage for the other 8? And would I be as good of a jump rope, a rope jumper?
Right. So the analogy of the jump rope example, which is a great example, to what we've shown in the lab is that, yeah, first you have to consolidate the skills. So you need 1 or 2 days of extensive practice, not brief practice. There's no way to get around that. You need to consolidate the skill and build the underlying brain network in your brain, right? And then once you efficiently consolidate the skill, then you come on the next day, and instead of, as you said, instead of repeatedly practicing the jump rope again and again, you perform a brief reactivation of what you learned on day 1 or day 2, okay, of only several seconds, if you want an analogy to what we've shown in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
And then you repeat these reactivations on separate days. And the separate is the key word here, because you need, after reactivation, each reactivation, you need the time, the offline time, including sleep,
right,
in order for this to get restored and further improved in that brain network overnight. So you come on separate days for only a few seconds of performing the task. And then after repeated reactivations, you're able to improve your skill of jumping the rope. Now, things are not usually as simple, right? We need for every task to understand how to tailor these reactivations based on your initial performance and initial encoding of the skill. But that doesn't matter for now. But the main thing is the main framework is these brief reactivations on separate days.
Now, you already covered sleep and consolidation, so I'm going to leave that one alone. So these memories, when we retrieve them and then put them back over and over again, do they tend to become sharper memories, or do they actually tend to become maybe a little fuzzy, blurry, because every time we put them back, they maybe, as you point out, get slightly modified here, slightly modified there?
Right. So this is true. So this really depends on the nature of the memory, and more specifically on how you retrieve it. So what we've shown, for example, in the motor skill learning domain, is that these reactivation, this cycle of reactivation, restorage of the memory, is most efficient if these brief reactivations are. So we as I said, this study was about a motor skill learning task. So you need these reactivations to be with relatively little amount of errors while performing these brief executions of the motor task. Otherwise, and we've shown that in our paper, otherwise, if it is not error-free or almost error-free, then it happens exactly what you alluded to. You reactivate the memory in a non-complete and comprehensive way, and then it gets restored with these errors that were performed during the retrieval. So we showed that in these cases, this reactivation restorage cycle is not efficient, as efficient at least, in inducing the learning of that motor skill.
You know, memory is a phenomenal and mysterious thing. I have one exit on the highway over here. When I first moved here, I made a mistake and went to this particular road instead of this one, got off the exit here instead of there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Every time I'm going into that area of town, I start to question myself, what exit is it? And I get completely flustered. I'm like, oh man. And like every time I do this over and over again. So I repeat the error in recalling the memory. And this happened to me as a young man. This is this funny story. I never thought I'd be telling this story on this show. When I was a young man, I lived in Las Vegas. I rescued a dog. I couldn't keep the dog because I lived in an apartment, but I took it and had the shots and all that sort of stuff. And then I put an ad in the paper, and this lovely family, they answered they said they'll take the dog. So when I was driving to their house, I made a right turn on this street, and I looked on the street, and I stopped in front of the house, and I went to the wrong house and rang the doorbell, and they said, oh no, you want the next street over. I went to the next street over and delivered the dog. 2 days later, they said they lost the dog and they couldn't find the dog. I don't know why, but I went to that house that I made the mistake, and they had the dog. They said, oh yeah, the dog was here in our front yard, because the dog remembered that mistake too in the location and went back to that location. So this is really interesting what you're saying, because when you build that memory, if there is an error in it, you tend to repeat that error every time as well.
Right. Because you not only repeat it, you actually by performing it again, you restore that error.
Yeah, you strengthen it. You strengthen it. That's so funny.
Right.
That's so funny. Now I understand why. So, you did this with both humans and animals, right?
No, actually, our motivation to do this was in basic science animal studies, but we study only humans.
Oh, okay. So, but I mean, this is actually in humans. You have done this research where you've used these techniques to build stronger motor coordination and motor skills by using this. Can you give me some examples of some of the types of things that you've had people do in your observations?
Yeah. So, for example, a study that just got recently published in the motor skill learning domain is a basic task that is used to model motor skill learning in humans across many labs in the world. And this task is very close to a basic typing task. So you have a sequence of numbers of which are actually, each number is paired to a specific, oh, you can't see my hand, to a specific a finger movement. So you have like 4 1 3 2 4 4 1 3 2 4, and you have to repeatedly tap that sequence over and over again during a fixed trial of like 10 or 30 seconds, as quickly but also as accurately as you can. Now, the challenge here is not to memorize a 5-digit number, right? That's easy. Right. The challenge here is to have your motor system memorize it, quote unquote, and perform the sequence automatically and very fast and accurately. And people get very significant improvements in performing that task. And we showed that this reactivation restorage protocol was as efficient as a full training protocol in this task. So this is just one example of a motor skill task.
Well, this actually speaks to the question that we're getting right now from Taylor C., who is watching us on Facebook right now. He says, how does age affect this research? I've been learning the guitar since April. And what kind of hacks can a 44-year-old man use to learn faster? What would you say to him?
Well, to the first part of the question, so talking about brain plasticity in general, and more specifically about plasticity in the early sensory areas, for example, the early visual areas and the very most primitive motor areas in our brain, it was once thought that after the brain finished its development, it's called the critical period, around the age of 17, 19, 20, then there is no way to induce efficient plasticity in early sensory areas. So your basic visual perception is set at age 19 and 20, and from there it can only go downhill. You cannot improve it further. That's what people used to think. But now it's known that it's not the case, and with efficient training, you can induce brain plasticity, which promotes development of these regions in the brain, and also the development of learning of basic visual and motor skills. Getting to the second part of the question, and he's not 44 years old, he's 44 years young. So getting to the second part of the question, then if you want to try and implement, and I want to be careful here because implementation from the basic science results to real life, it has to be with caution, but just as a very general suggestion, if you want to try to implement this, then I would try and while you practice your guitar, and you learn a new piece that you want to play. So if I want an analogy for what we showed in the lab, then use the first 2 or 3 days to extensively practice the new piece that you want to play with your guitar. But then on subsequent days, don't practice as intensely as you practice during the first acquisition of the skill, but try to kind of use these brief reactivations and just play brief parts of what you've learned for only several minutes or even seconds, and let it go after you're done. And then come in the next day and see whether these several seconds or minute or two of these retrievals improve your the way you play this new piece that you've learned.
You know, I'm listening to this discussion, and I'm lining up so many things in my own life that, you know, I'm a motorcycle rider, and there is certain things that I like to do on my motorcycle and get better and better at cornering and very, very fast and speed shifting. And I notice that I can, and I think a lot about riding my motorcycle. I think a lot about fixing my motorcycle. I think a lot about the things I want to do with my motorcycle. And I can tell a big difference that even after I've learned something new on my bike, a new way to make a U-turn, you know, whatever, I'm much better at it weeks later, even though I haven't done it in weeks later, because it kind of, I don't know, it just, I couldn't explain it until this discussion. The same thing when I've gone to Europe and I've gone to Ireland and I had to learn how to drive on the wrong side of the car, on the wrong side of the road. It became easier and easier around the third or fourth day, even though I didn't necessarily drive every day over those 3 or 4 days. It's weird. You're right. It's like these because you replay things in your head without even thinking about it a lot of times. And
right.
Those replays are actually connecting your arms, your muscles, your neck, your shoulders to the activity and taking it through it again every single time. It's really fascinating. I've never really thought about this until this discussion right now.
Great. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. This brain network that is initially formed through practice, there's no way around it, right? Or through experience of a new memory or a new task. You're right. It takes time after you acquire the skill. Then these plasticity processes to further strengthen the connections within the nodes of the network takes time. And a lot of it happens, as we've mentioned briefly before, a lot of it happens during sleep.
Yes.
A lot of these consolidation and additional consolidation periods.
And the elderly don't sleep well. We've done some of the early shows on memory consolidation and sleep years and years ago. And we know the elderly don't sleep well. And they don't put the memories away. They're all fragmented all over the place. The hard drive isn't nice and neat and easy to access. Oh, that memory's over here. And that happens because of poor sleep. So
yeah, it's one of the reasons. Yeah.
There are things that we know now that can benefit us as far as neuroplasticity goes. The upregulation of brain, BDNF, brain, I forget what the D stands for, nutritic
Yeah,
factor.
yeah, yeah.
Exercise, obviously, good sleep. But what about psychedelics? They're becoming very fascinating right now. People are working with psychedelics, and they're adding back in a certain level of neuroplasticity to elderly people. Is there any benefits with memory and psychedelics that you've heard about, Professor Censor?
Well, maybe heard, but not. It's not kind of the core of my research. So again, I'm very conservative in a way. By, you know, I sound very confident, but it's only about things that I really are at the heart of my research.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
So, in the real world, obviously, you're looking for real world solutions for people. Where do you see people applying your techniques with the greatest benefits?
So yeah, our hope is that people will take our basic science findings and implement it in daily life. I think there are many targets here that are very interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is the educational system. People have to memorize facts over and over again and repeatedly execute skills over and over again. Maybe by adapting our findings to the classroom, we can efficiently save time for students having to learn new things. Now, I'm not saying that this should work for everything that they learn. For example, I'm not sure that our technique or our findings are applicable for solving, you know, uh, uh, complicated mathematical equations or problems in physics. Because what I think is that our most applicable target in the classroom would be things that you have to memorize and repeat over and over again in order to become proficient in. It's less about things that are more cognitively based and more high level thinking, but more about automaticity. So things that you can, and actually, we have now underway a study that we're doing in the lab, looking at the multiplication table, whether our paradigm can help people learn the multiplication table faster. Now, because we're not doing this current study with kids, but rather with healthy adults, they already know and familiar with the multiplication table. So for that aim, we developed kind of a new operator, like not multiplication, but something like 9 and 7 is 21, something different from the multiplication table, because most adults already know the multiplication table, and we have initial evidence that it works also there, because this is kind of a skill that requires repetitive training. Now, if we can help kids and students learn things faster, then I think that's a very valuable target.
Absolutely.
And another thing is, as you alluded to, is before you mentioned aging. We discussed that. So a lot of learning and memory problems in aging, maybe this technique or this kind of knowledge can be implemented there. And finally, if you look more into the clinical implications, people after neurological disorders, for example, stroke, and more specifically, for example, motor stroke. These people have to relearn, basic motor functions that they've mastered, like you and I, all their life. They have to learn to walk again. They have to learn to write again. And rehabilitation in hospitals and in clinics, it's a very, very tedious and very, very long and effortful process. If this could be applied there, then this could have very significant benefits.
I agree. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about one of your other studies and how it ties into this. The one on the visual motor cortex. I've got it here in front of me. Neuromodulation of the visual cortex reduces the intensity of intrusive memories, Can we talk about that when we come back?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, sit tight. We're going to take one quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Have you been struggling to achieve results in the gym? Trouble sleeping through the night? Overwhelmed with stress or anxiety? Look no further than Infiniwell supplements. They have designed products to address specific needs like muscle growth, hormone balance, sleep, and anxiety from the first use. Infiniwell helps you live well. Go to shrnetwork.biz/bewell, that's BEWELL, and use code SHR20 and start living well today. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
If you've listened to Superhuman Radio for any length of time, you know I'm a big proponent of peptides. One of my favorites is GHK-Cu, the blue copper peptide. It has the ability to repair and regenerate more youthful expression of skin cells, reversing the signs of aging. Restora Cell's Stem Cell Awakening Serum, along with their other products, contains potent formulations of blue copper peptides and only the highest quality organic ingredients. Superhuman Radio listeners can now save 25% site-wide. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use the code SHR25. Remodel your skin today. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code superhuman to save 10% off your entire first order. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that. Do this. Avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/inside tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Hey, welcome back to Superhuman Radio. We're talking with Professor Nitzan Censor. He's with the University of Tel Aviv, correct? That's where you are, right? University of Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the most beautiful city I've ever seen outside of the United States. It's like a clean Manhattan with cordial people. They're nice people. Everybody likes you, and nobody's trying to rob your purse. But
why are you saying outside of the United States? Just say it's the most beautiful city in the world.
Yeah, it is. It really is. When I stay at the Tel Aviv Hilton, behind the hotel, they have gigantic pool. And when I arrived in the evening, it was empty. And when I woke up in the morning, they were filling it up with the water from the Mediterranean. They fill it up with the water from the Mediterranean. A lot of the elderly people come and they swim in it because they want to swim in the Mediterranean, but the Mediterranean, they're worried maybe the water's rough. And so they swim in this pool. They get out. At night, they empty the pool out again. It's completely empty. They put all the water back in the Mediterranean. I've never seen anything like that in my life. It's the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. Really.
No.
Really, really is. So let's talk about this other study.
Yeah.
How does the visual cortex play a role in some of these more intense memories that we have?
Yeah, so I like this study a lot. First, I would say it was led by Noah Hertz from our lab, who's now a postdoc with Mike Kahana at University of Pennsylvania, and in collaboration with Yair Bar Chaim. He's a clinical psychologist from our department at Tel Aviv University, and the kind of the motivation for that study came from the thought that, well, now we're confident that these reactivations are efficient in strengthening memories that are good for us, beneficial for us, for learning new skills. But if a mechanism exists in our brain, then our brain shouldn't care if it's something good for us or not good for us. It's just there. And the thought was, well, if these reactivations can strengthen memories which are good for us, then they probably also strengthen negative memories. And that was the motivation for us to do a set of studies, and this is one of them, hypothesizing that in case of negative memories, like for example, traumatic memories following negative events, for example, in PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorders, then one of the key phenomena there is the memory intrusions. And people experiencing PTSD, they often, after their traumatic event, one of the things that they suffer from most is these memory intrusions. So they just go about their daily life, and all of a sudden appears in their mind an intrusion of that traumatic memory. And in extreme cases of this condition, then it doesn't allow them to function in everyday life.
Right.
So we thought that these are actually spontaneous reactivations of, this time, not a good memory for learning, but a negative memory. And we showed that in a separate study, but the focus of this study was, okay, if this is the case, now we want to downregulate that memory, not to strengthen it, because these memories are not good for us.
Right.
And what we did here, this study was performed with healthy participants. So we had to kind of create a model for traumatic memories in their brain. And we didn't invent this model. It's used throughout the world. They view kind of non-pleasant, publicly available YouTube video clips of unpleasant scenes. And they have these intrusions in the days that follow. Now, since this is a model and not PTSD patients, healthy participants, then it only stays for a few days and then it decays and dissipates, which is good, right? We don't want to create new traumas to people. But in this window of 4 or 5 days, we have a good model to study traumatic memory. And what we did here is, according to the thought of the reactivation restorage, we reactivated, this time the negative, the traumatic memory, and paired this reactivation with an inhibitory signal. And the thought was that this would cause then the restorage of the traumatic memory would be impaired, and they will have less intrusions or less intense intrusions of that negative memory. And in order to do this inhibition, we used non-invasive brain stimulation, which is applicable for humans. So we cannot stick electrodes in a healthy human brain, but there's a technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And in brief, it's a coil placed over the skull, and you deliver a current through the coil and induces a magnetic field. The magnetic field penetrates the scalp and then activates the brain tissue just underneath the surface of the coil. And there are different, and this is a field going on for the last 3 or 4 decades. It's a widely used technique, and
so it's just a magnetic field. They're just transmitting a magnetic field into the
right,
brain.
right, and with a specific protocol, stimulation protocol, that could inhibit the brain activity just underneath the stimulating coil. So we use this to inhibit brain activity, synchronized with reactivation. And the reactivation was performed in the lab. We brought them back to the lab and reminded them of these traumatic films and clips. And paired with the reactivation, we use this magnetic transcranial magnetic stimulation in an inhibitory protocol. And what we showed is that following this stimulation paired with reactivation, the emotional intensity associated with the intrusions in the following days, because they had this app of kind of a phone diary in which they recorded the intrusions that they had in subsequent days, and the emotional intensity that accompanied these intrusions. And we clearly saw in this study a decline in the intensity of these emotional intensity of these intrusions. And the place in the brain where we stimulate it is the primary visual cortex. It's in the back of our brain. And that's the place where visual information comes initially, is processed in the cortex. And this is the thought to do that was because these intrusions are so visually vivid, and it's kind of a replay of the visual memory in the brain, which is why we stimulated and targeted the visual cortex paired with these reactivations.
I'm putting these images up because Natalie just found these. Thank you so much. Natalie just put these up. This is you in the lab doing this, isn't it?
Yeah, very nice.
How do you like that? You didn't. We had cameras in your lab. You didn't know that, did you?
That's a bit scary, but I'll live with that.
Okay, let's see what this one is that Natalie put up. She just put this up. Oh, this is the doesn't practice make perfect. Okay, but yeah, this is you. So that's the magnetic device there, held up against that young boy's head, right?
Right, exactly. So
okay,
this is
I have some questions that you probably won't get from most of the people who interview you about this. Were these pulses, first of all, the magnetic field, they were pulsed, I would imagine?
Yeah, pulsed.
Do you know the frequency by any chance?
Yeah, the inhibitory protocol is a 1 hertz frequency, and we do this for 15 minutes of 1 hertz.
And how many, what's the Gauss of the magnet for it to get into the area of the brain that you want to get to?
Right, so the maximum output of the stimulator we and most of other people use is 2 Tesla. But we adjust the exact percentage of that maximal output. We adjust it to every participant's brain. So we are able to measure the excitability of an individual's brain by stimulating the motor system. So we deliver 1 pulse over the motor cortex, and that creates through the spine, it activates the muscle and creates a twitch in the stimulated muscle. And we connect electrodes to the stimulated muscle. We can see the evoked potential, the amplitude of the evoked potential from the muscle, and we adjust the output of the stimulator, and we measure what is the output that is required to deliver a just noticeable twitch in that muscle, and that is kind of a measure of the excitability of the brain,
of the particular brain. Yeah. Fascinating. So over the period of exposure to the pulse magnet, the intensity of the intrusive memory became less. Did the fact that the intensity became less make so I kind of feel like there's a certain anxiety capacity, people with PTSD, when they start to feel this memory come on, it comes on very rapidly, but then it's that angst that they have about not only about the actual events they're recalling, but the fact that they're not going to be, they can't finish their job, their work, so do you see their ability to manage these memories become easier to the point where it's not that scary anymore and they just stop happening?
Yeah, this is something this is one of our plans for the follow-up study, to actually test it not in a model of healthy participants, but in real PTSD patients. And our hope is that this could at least reduce the frequency and the intensity of these intrusive memories. I find it hard to believe that these memories will disappear completely. And you know what? Actually, I'm not sure that we want them to disappear completely, because we don't want to change, a human brain completely. As much as they're very unpleasant memories, it's part of the personality of the person. But what we do, and clinicians, we and clinicians who deal with this in their clinic, they definitely want, kind of relief for daily life. So at the very least, to reduce the frequency of these intrusions and the intensity, the emotional intensity that accompanies these intrusions.
This is really fascinating. I have a very, very good friend who is a retired Navy SEAL, and he saw a lot of action.
Yeah.
And he suffers with PTSD, and unfortunately, he turns to alcohol quite often to try to manage himself, and he doesn't want to. And I mean, this is a really fascinating concept here. This is something that he could do where he is right now and see if it works. I actually have some pretty sophisticated pulse electromagnetic field devices at home that I would be willing to send to him to try this. But obviously,
this is the point where I should say, don't try this at home, right?
Yeah. No, I know, and I'm not suggesting that you are suggesting that, but this is really fascinating, because there's a lot of people out there whose lives will never be, never reach complete fulfillment, because these types of thoughts derail them over and over again throughout their lives. So that's really fascinating. I want to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up the discussion. If you want to post any questions, please post in Facebook or YouTube. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Microbes make up your immune system. That's why I'm really excited about P3OM. P3OM is a patented probiotic that might be the most effective probiotic ever developed. P3OM fights bad bacteria and strengthens immunity, basically a germ-fighting superhero. But it also helps digestion, speeds up metabolism, and increases energy throughout the day. That's way more than I thought a probiotic could do. And just when I thought P3OM couldn't get any more powerful, I watched a video that you can find at shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM of this probiotic literally breaking down a piece of steak. After I saw that, I was all in. Here's some more awesome news. You can get 10% off P3OM right now by going to shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM and by using the coupon code SHR10. And if you order it and it's not everything that you thought it would be, they will give you 100% of your money back, no questions asked. So if you want to protect yourself from whatever bug is floating around this year and take your digestion to a new level, visit shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off today. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.
Welcome back. How do you choose subjects for your studies? Obviously, you need healthy brains for this sort of thing. You just choose young people?
Yeah, usually studies we and others do in basic brain function in our healthy volunteers from 18 to 40, 50 years old. So we post ads, and also a lot of them are students in the university. We make sure they're not aware of what the research is about, and
Do you ask them about their diet or their level of exercise or how well they sleep? Or you have those kind of questions in the questionnaire?
Right. We have questions that are related that in any topic that may be directly related to the question of interest. So, for example, what you've mentioned, sleep. So we make sure they sleep at least 6 hours before each experimental session, because we're very well aware of the interactions between sleep and learning and memory processing.
Yeah.
And we try not to, if it's university students, then we make sure that they don't participate in a learning experimental session if they have an exam that day or that week, for that matter, and so on. Yeah.
So I have a lot of doctors who listen to the show and clinicians. Can they reach out to you if they want to try to explore this disruption of the visual cortex, PTSD type of therapy?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot to be done to take it from the, our basic science lab to the clinic, but sure.
I mean, we have so many people in our society today who were raped as children, and and their lives just can't go forward, and it's just because of these memories just keep haunting them. And it's back in the old days when my father went to the war. They used to call them shell shocked, like, the war just shook them up so bad. And most of those guys ended up being alcoholics. All they did was stay drunk all the time. And I'm sure that they were trying to numb the pain of their memories. That's all they would do. Memory.
Yeah, another sad thing is that they're very often forgotten, right?
Yes.
Like they did their stuff. Now,
but it's different in Israel, because everybody goes into the military in Israel. I got to tell you, we need to do that here in the United States. We'd have a lot less social justice warriors trying to get you to use different adverbs and adjectives if we had everybody go into the military for a few years right out of college or high school. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you, actually, before we move on, what do you hope clinicians and lay people take away from your research?
I think one of the things is to, as a scientist, the one of the reasons why I like to talk, in such platforms, and I appreciate you having me here, is to kind of, even before going into the specifics of my research, is to have lay people and people who are not very close to, university and science, which maybe some of the audiences that listen or watch, to appreciate science and to understand that science is and science methodology and is something important for our society, and to support science and to promote science. And there's so many alternatives out there, people trying to make claims without scientific support. Not everything is within the scientific domain, but the things that are, then respect science and pay attention to science and try to read and educate yourself as much as you can. I think that is something very important for the kind of the general audience. And specifically here, I think that I hope that the findings from our lab on ways to make learning and memory more efficient on one hand, and downregulate memories when they're maladaptive.
Yeah.
I hope this will be taken to the next step to be implicated in daily life. This is this is one of the things that drives our motivation, that it's not only science that will stay in the lab, but will be taken out of the lab as well to help people in their daily lives.
We'll take this last question from Taylor C. On Facebook. He says, does the doctor associate this research with EMDR therapy? Now, I don't know what EMDR therapy is.
Yeah, so there's many ways to try and treat PTSD and traumatic memories. And one of them is to try and have, the patients, after they recall their trauma, move their eyes, make eye movements very rapidly all over the place, because the thought is that this will activate kind of the spatiotemporal aspect of the memory, and try and interfere with the memory. So it does resemble, in a way, this notion of reactivation and restorage. I find some similarity there.
I you know what, I've thought about that a lot over the years, because REM sleep, your body, you're accessing your hard drive, so to speak. You're putting stuff here, you're putting stuff there. And then I remember as a kid, someone once told me, you can always tell if somebody's lying to you, because if they look to the left, they're recalling, but if they're looking to the right, they're talking about the future. So if they're giving you an answer, if you say to them, where is this, and they look to the right, they're lying, because they're not accessing. And I don't believe any of that. I think that in the case of REM sleep and memory consolidation, I think that the eyes are kind of like a symptom of memory consolidation, not indicative of where the brain is putting things. And so I've always thought that. Do you think I'm wrong about that?
Well, I'm not. What I do know is that in REM sleep, you're right. There are definitely processes that promote consolidation, and it's not only REM sleep. People are most familiar with REM sleep, but it's also slow wave sleep, which are the other phase of sleep, and that these are characterized by larger amplitudes of brain activity. So it is thought that during this slow wave sleep, the information is more kind of distributed across this network that created the memory in the first place. So the combination of REM sleep and slow wave sleep is what strengthens the memory and enables efficient consolidation. The eye movements is not the main thing here. It's what happens kind of in the brain. Yeah.
The more often you recall a memory and then fold it up and put it away again, versus memories that you don't think about for a very long time and says, hey, remember that time? And you go, oh yeah. And it kind of comes back to you. And it's, do you think that the more often you recall a memory and put it away, there's a higher probability that it will be preserved, or a higher probability that it'll be kind of faded away?
I think that the more you retrieve the memory, there's a higher probability that it will be efficiently restored in the brain. But that's, again, under the assumption that you retrieve it and restore it without more than a minimal amount of errors.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that. Yeah.
Listen, this has been fascinating. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope that when you publish something new that you'll come back.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Take care, Professor Censor. We'll see you again. All right, and that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, always share the show. You never know who you can help. If you help one person, we've achieved our goal. And we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thanks for being here today.